On today's show, NBA trade season is nearly upon us, and the Nets are once again at the center of speculation. I'll tell you why Brooklyn will be one of the most active deadline teams and what trades could be coming right now.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And on today's episode, the trade deadline is approaching. Trade speculation is rampant throughout the NBA, and the Nets are once again one of the teams at the forefront. And make no mistake about it, the Nets will be one of the NBA's most active teams in trade conversations leading up to the deadline. And a lot of that has to do with their cap space, some of the veterans they have on their team, the situation that they're going into with their rebuild. I'm going to touch on all of that. But first, the Nets do have $15 million in cap space. They are the NBA's only team with significant cap space. The Jazz are one of the other teams that they don't have cap space. They have a large trade exception, and they're in a rebuild, so they could be players there. But that's one of the top reasons. But going past that, you have the players that the Nets, could be shopping, could be on the move for various different reasons. And I want to start with the players, and the player I want to start with is Cam Thomas, because Cam Thomas is the most likely Net to be traded. I've said that since he signed the QO. I've said that I thought that he was going to be a trade candidate. I said that this was all trending towards a midseason trade. That's what I've continued to be hearing from the Nets perspective. And then Shams Charania also came out with a trade intel piece today, and he had a blurb in it where he said, and I quote, "Brooklyn could also work with Cam Thomas's agent at Octagon to navigate his future, potentially via trade, as he plays the remainder of the season on the qualifying offer and will be an unrestricted free agent next summer." So I've been telling you this for a while, at least from the Nets perspective. You got Shams there. He mentioned Cam's agency. Shams is in with all the agents. He obviously talks to rival teams, so that could give you a sense of around the league, people, following that, starting to brace for that. That's been a logical conclusion point to all of this. And I think that that's only grown more obvious as the season has progressed with how it's played out. And it really hasn't played out favorably for Cam Thomas from the sense that he played those first 7 games. He wasn't terrible. Like, he had some good games, he had some bad games, but then he goes down, and the Nets have just looked so much better, frankly, since he's been out. And I've brought that up just to answer the question of, with the timeline of Cam's injury, people speculating when he would be back, all that. I'd posed a question like, why would you bring Cam back? I mean, like, what benefit does that serve to the Nets at this point, other than to maybe improve his value if you want to shop him? But I don't necessarily think that he's going to have that much value, so I don't know how much sense that makes. But if you just look at the numbers, the Nets 0-7 with Cam to start the season. They're 6-10 since he's gone down, and 6-7 in games that Michael Porter Jr. has played. And the offense has been relatively unfazed. I think it's gone down like 1 point per 100 possessions, so nearly the exact same offensive rating. And the defense has gotten 13 points better per 100 possessions. So the defense has just been night and day. That's been the reason that the Nets have been so much better as of late, and why their net rating, the record, all of that stuff has improved, because you've taken Cam out of the lineup and you've replaced him with guys like Noah Clowney, Drake Powell, whoever else you want to say was kind of now Danny Wolf. Like, the Nets are just such a bigger team in terms of the lineups that they're putting out. There just isn't that one like defensive liability in terms of size and some of that stuff in Cam Thomas out there. And then you just look at the way that the Nets are playing offensively. I mean, the offensive rating, as I said, has been around the same, but like, so many guys are taking so many positive steps developmentally with the Nets playing this more like holistic, spread out, evenly distributed style of basketball. Obviously, the offense has gone from, in those first 7 games, it was almost completely built around Cam Thomas. He was posting a 32% usage rate, so just dominating the ball. And then it's kind of gone to curtailing the entire offense around Michael Porter Jr. and his off-ball movement since Cam Thomas has gone down. And MPJ has obviously played at an MP level since Cam Thomas's injury. I went over that on a recent episode with Lucas Kaplan, but MPJ is averaging 28 points on near 50, 40, 90 shooting splits since Cam Thomas has gone down. And this is an extended sample size. We're talking about, 13 games that MPJ has played without CT in the lineup. So he's looked really good. And then outside of that, Nick Claxton's looked really good. And then you have so many young players that have shown promise. When you talk about Yegor Dioman, Noah Clowney, obviously, Drake Powell, now Danny Wolf, all of these guys just getting added on-ball reps and looking so good. I think that obviously is not going to bode well for any argument for Cam Thomas to be brought back into this rotation. And Jordy Fernandez was asked about this during the pregame press conference before the Pelicans game on Saturday. And he gave an answer that pretty much confirmed, to me at least, that Cam Thomas is going to be out of here, and that could be happening sooner rather than later. But here's the answer in the quote that we got from Jordy Fernandez. He was asked about implementing Cam Thomas back into the lineup and the challenges that presents, given how differently and frankly better the Nets have played before and after his injury. And this is the exact quote from Jordy. He said, "That's a good question. Obviously, his superpower is the ability he has to score. At the same time, we always want to see playmaking efficiency and improvement on defense. So all those things were important at the time. Now, with him being out, the team continues to get better and play in a good way. The skill set, he's very unique and very good at what he does. But at the same time, now the group is taking positive steps. For the most part, I'm very happy with the whole group. And now when he comes back, it's going to be on me to figure it out how we introduce him to the group, and thinking that the most important thing, it's always the group. And then from there, you have to ensure that you're willing to do whatever it takes to help the group and then obviously help yourself. That's how this team works. Team success will bring your own success as well." So that's a quote from Jordan Fernandez. Long quote. Wanted to give you the whole thing so you got an understanding of it. But there were a few lines in that quote that really stood out to me, and I was frankly surprised that Jordy said, because Jordy's not always the most candid guy when it comes to topics that could be somewhat controversial like this, and most NBA coaches aren't. But Jordy said, now with Cam being out, the team continues to get better and play in a good way. And then he said he's very unique and very good at what he does, but at the same time, now the group is taking positive steps. So to me, that's about as clear-cut an answer that you're going to get regarding the future of a player on a team. And this shouldn't come as too much of a surprise to any fans, at least if you watch this show based on what I've been saying. But to hear Jordan Fernandez say that to me is like the proverbial nail in the coffin for this Cam Thomas tenure. And that to me signals that I'm not too sure if Cam's going to play another game with this team. I mean, the Nets put out a timeline on Saturday. They said that Cam had an MRI that was positive, showed good results, and that he had begun on-court play and his on-court return to play progression. And they said that he was going to have his status updated again in approximately 2 weeks. So that'll be around December 20th. So you would think Cam probably will be ready to come back right around Christmas or sometime around Christmas. But Cam is going to be eligible to be traded on December 15th. That's the day when any of the free agents or most of the free agents who signed this prior offseason will be eligible to be traded. That's the date at which Dennis Schroeder got traded by the Nets last season. So the Nets put out this timeline that is taking you, right past or a week past that December 15th date. And based on how things are going and based on how Jordan Fernandez is talking and based on that quote that we got from Shams Charania, I would not at all be shocked if some kind of a trade is worked out before then. I wouldn't be shocked, but I also say that, you're looking at what a trade for Cam Thomas is going to look like. And I've said that I don't think that he's necessarily going to be a guy who has a big market because from everything that I've heard, around the league, when I've asked people about it, nobody has ever said anything about Cam Thomas having any kind of significant market. So the question is going to be, if the Nets are trying to trade him, or if they do try to trade him before he, re-enters the rotation, is there going to be anybody who wants him at that date just as like a standalone? Because you usually don't see bigger deals get done that early. So would anybody take a flyer on him at $6 million as an expiring contract, maybe give you a second-round pick or another player in return? If that's the case, it could be a chance that the Nets could get rid of him, before he comes back from this injury. If not, he may be back in the rotation. He may come back, because I don't think that the Nets are just going to sit him down on the bench if he is healthy and fully ready and there is no trade to be made. Because, you look at Cam, and another way that he could be traded is if he's a salary filler in a bigger deal, in a bigger salary dump, whether you talk about the Celtics and Anthony Simons, which I'm going to get into, or any of those things. Cam is a $6 million expiring contract. So you can use that in deals to help facilitate. And those types of deals, bigger deals, usually don't happen until closer to the trade deadline. So that could potentially keep Cam on the team longer, throughout past this December 15th date and past when he's ready to come back from injury. So we'll see. I think either way, it seems to be trending towards a trade. And I think that, I wouldn't be shocked if he's gone before he's ready to come back or before that reevaluation date that the Nets put on him. I do think it's pretty, convenient that date and that timeline that they put out has carried Cam right past the date that he's going to be eligible to be traded. And with this Shams report about the Nets potentially working with Cam's representation, those things don't come out of nowhere. So we'll see. I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion that Cam is going to be traded. It's just a matter of when. And if it's further down the line, how do they manage him in the meantime in terms of how the rotation works out? But that's all I got on Cam Thomas. There's several other trades that could be on the horizon for the Nets. There's several impact players who could be on the block, and there's several moves that they could be looking to make in the salary dump landscape, which is one that they were extremely active in, historically active in this past summer. So what could those trades look like, and what should fans be expecting moving forward? I'll get into all that when I continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, there's no reason to let big wireless drain your wallet, especially during the holidays. Right now, Mint Mobile is running their best deal of the year. All of their unlimited plans are 50% off. That means you can lock in 3, 6, or even 12 months of unlimited premium wireless for just $15 a month. It's the easiest way to take your overpriced phone bill and give it the full Scrooge treatment. And what makes this even better is how simple Mint makes the switch. No contracts, no nonsense, just real savings and real quality service. Guys, switching to Mint lets you keep your same coverage for a lower price. Setup takes only a few minutes. You can bring your own phone and number without any issues. The service is fast and super reliable, even on the go. So turn your expensive wireless present into a huge wireless savings future by switching to Mint. Shop Mint Unlimited plans at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNBA. Limited time offer, upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12 months. Plan required, $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees, initial plan term only. Above 35 gigabytes may slow when the network is busy. Capable device required. Availability, speed, and coverage varies. See mintmobile.com for details. Coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, and a big announcement from Locked On this week. We are rolling out access to something called the Everydayer Club, a subscription-based service. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Nets with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. So go to the link description in the comments and in the show notes to hit that and subscribe. But getting back to the trade conversation surrounding the Nets, because I'm previewing the NBA trade deadline, and the Nets, as I said, going to be one of the NBA's most active teams, at least in conversation. I touched on Cam Thomas, and another big part of that is going to be their cap space, because the Nets are the NBA's only team with significant cap space right now, really any cap space. The Nets have just over $15 million in space. The Utah Jazz are another team that doesn't have space, but they have $18 million, an $18 million trade exception, and they're a rebuilding team, so maybe they can get involved in some conversations. But Shams Charania, in addition to the Cam Thomas thing, had this in his intel piece, and he said the Nets have $15 million in cap space and can create more, which has led to increased trade talks about using their room to absorb salary while receiving assets. So that is going to be the conversation. The Nets obviously were historically active in the salary dump landscape this summer. That was their whole strategy in terms of the trade market. They made 4 separate salary dump trades. They took on Terrence Mann in his 3 years, $47 million in that 3-team trade with the Celtics and Hawks. They got that number 21 pick or number 22 pick that turned into Drake Powell. They did the MPJ deal where they got him and the unprotected 2032 pick for Cam Johnson. They got Haywood Highsmith from the Heat alongside an unprotected 2032 second-round pick. And then they got Kobe Buffkin from the Hawks, but they all obviously ended up waiving him. But that has been the strategy for Sean Marks going back to early in his Nets tenure as GM. He did that out of the gate the first time in the Nets rebuild, and now he's kind of set it up again where he made all of these moves last season, holding on to guys like Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder, even Cam Johnson, to the point where, they could get expiring contracts. Like they held on to guys like Dennis Schroeder and Dorian Finney-Smith to the point where they could get expiring contracts like DeAnthony Melton and D'Angelo Russell in order to preserve this cap space. And they had that cap space in the summer. They used upwards of $40 million to collect some assets, and they still have $15 million left. And because of that, there's going to be teams who are looking to shed salary who are going to be in the market to be in conversations with the Nets. And the Nets are going to help, be able to facilitate a lot of salary dump deals. They could also facilitate bigger trades because with the aprons and the restrictions that the first and second apron put on teams, it makes making trades a lot harder. So if you can get a third team who has cap space or flexibility to help facilitate those deals, that could make things a lot easier. The Giannis Antetokounmpo situation, that could resolve before the deadline. There could be other guys who are on the trade block. The Nets, using this flexibility that they have, can be in a lot of those conversations and potentially get an asset alongside that. In addition, just the salary dump landscape. I've talked about it. The Boston Celtics are the main team that I would be looking to if I were a Nets fan, because the Celtics are $12 million above the luxury tax right now, and they're going to be trying to dip under that to reset the repeater tax and just have a clean books moving forward when they get Jason Tatum back and they kind of try to go into the next iteration of this team. Mike Scotto, Hoops Hype, friend of the pod, he was on the pod talking about this. The Nets and the Celtics had conversations over the summer about Anthony Simons, because the Celtics got Anthony Simons in that Jrue Holiday trade. They obviously shed salary in that deal to get under the second apron, but now they're going to want to try to get off Simons to get under the luxury tax also. So Simons is at around $27.7 million expiring contracts. So they could look to get off him. They could also look to get off Sam Hauser to dip below the luxury tax. But Simons is the guy that I would be looking at. And with him being an expiring, the Nets have, I've talked about it. They have this window, $12.4 million to $15.6 million. Any salary that they send out in that range keeps them under the salary cap, and it gets the Celtics under the luxury tax. And with the Nets having four guys making around $6 million in Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe, Zaire Williams, and Haywood Highsmith, they are going to be able to make that happen. You send out two of those guys and you take back Simons alongside whatever draft compensation you can get from the Celtics. Obviously, there'll be negotiations there, but that's a framework that makes a lot of sense. That could be the deal that Cam Thomas is ultimately involved in or sent out. And the Celtics also had interest in Day'Ron Sharpe. They obviously have a need for a center. So there's a lot of things there that I think could be working for the Nets and the Celtics to get a deal done. That's the main team that I would be looking at. But outside of that, there are several other teams who I think could be in the market. Like, you look at the teams that are above the luxury tax who could be trying to get underneath it. The 76ers are a team that comes to mind. They're $7 million above the luxury tax. They have some guys who were mentioned in trade conversations this summer, Kelly Oubre and Andre Drummond mainly. I don't think Oubre, Oubre's hurt right now. I don't know how realistic he is to be just a salary dump, because he's been playing really well and could probably have positive value. Andre Drummond, the 76ers have been playing him, but he's obviously older. He hasn't looked great over the last, this season, and last season he really looked terrible. So he's at around $5 or $6 million. He could be a guy that the Nets could get involved in. The Clippers, another team, they're $6.8 million above the luxury tax, and they're a team that I've heard rumblings about them trying to get below the luxury tax to try to reset the repeater tax, because you look at the teams that are above the luxury tax and are trying to build something moving forward. Getting out of that repeater tax is going to be really important. And you have teams like the Celtics with Jason Tatum being out. They're trying to figure out the next iteration of this team. The Clippers, similar situation. Things obviously aren't going well with, Kawhi Leonard and James Harden and all the veterans that they invested in. They've been trying to keep their books clean for 2027, and they're going to try to move forward and rebuild this team or retool this team however they can. And resetting the repeater tax is going to go a long way, because it just completely increases the amount that you can spend for a long period of time without being hit with these ridiculous compounding penalties. So the Clippers are $6.8 million above the luxury tax. There's a lot of veterans there that just aren't working out. The team doesn't look good. So they're a team that I think the Nets could definitely get involved with as a salary dump partner. They have guys like Brook Lopez has been a huge disappointment. Bogdan Bogdanović has been hurt, and he hasn't really been looking too great since they acquired him. You have other guys who could potentially get involved. So they're another team. Another last team I'm going to mention, the Orlando Magic, $5.6 million above the luxury tax. They have a player in Jett Howard who's making right around that, and obviously has a dad, Juwan Howard, who is an assistant coach for the Nets. So could the Magic look to get under that and get under the luxury tax as they have historically? Like, those are all options there. So I just think there's a lot of possibilities for the Nets in terms of the salary dump landscape, in terms of being facilitators for other trades, whether bigger trades. And then beyond that, and the Cam Thomas conversation, you're obviously going to look at, MPJ, Nick Claxton, like some of these guys who have been impact players for this Nets team that is trying to tank right now and is winning just a little bit too many games right now. And that's crazy to say, because the Nets are 6-19, but the bottom of the league is so bad that the Nets are on the outside looking in. And right now, their most likely spot in the draft lottery standings looks like 4th or 5th or 6th, similar to last season. And I talked about this on Monday's episode with Lucas Kaplan, focusing on MPJ and also a little on Nick Claxton. But those are guys where the Nets are going to they're going to be put to a decision of, do we want to hold on to these guys and have them be, part of the team next season and us trying to improve, or are we valuing more trying to boost this draft pick and boost these draft lottery odds and maximize that and potentially sell high on these guys? So that is going to be a conversation leading up to the deadline, but I already touched on that at length in that Monday episode. So go check that out if you're interested. But the Nets, they're going to be one of the most active teams, at this year's trade deadline. There's going to be a lot of conversation, and I'm going to have coverage of all that. But I got one more segment left, and I got to throw some love to Nolan Traore, who's been down in the G League. He's kind of been the forgotten Nets rookies because he hasn't gotten any NBA minutes really this season. But after a rough start in the G League, he's turned it around and he's been balling as of late. So what have I seen from Nolan, and what do I think the prospects of him coming up to Brooklyn could look like? I'll get into all that when I close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands. It makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Guys, you pull up the app and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, and you have your tickets locked in with minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print, and prices include fees up front, which I love. No last-second surprises at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, hit on all of the trade speculation surrounding Brooklyn, and want to close it out talking about a Nets rookie who's kind of been the forgotten guy in this rookie class thus far, and that is Nolan Traore, a player who I think there was a fair amount of excitement about after the draft. He was a player who was a former top 10, even top 5 mocked guy at this time last year, but he had some struggles last season in France, and then he falls to the Nets at number 19. But one of the upside swings at point guard that the Nets made, and outside of a couple of, 8, 9, 10 minutes that he got in a couple of games earlier this season, Nolan really hasn't played. Like, he's been relegated to the G League for most of this season. And, he started off a little slow there, but he's really started to come on as of late. And he's looked like one of the best players the Nets have had down there in all of those games. Over Nolan's last 8 games, he's had 21 points, 7 assists, 3.3 turnovers, 52, 49, 78 shooting splits. So that is elite efficiency. And obviously, you look at everything that Nolan's been able to do from a scoring standpoint. I said 21 points, 52% from the field, 49% from 3. That's huge, especially from the 3-point shooting standpoint, because that was a question surrounding all of these Nets rookies and especially all the Nets rookies point guards in Yegor Dioman, Ben Sharaf, and Nolan Traore. Nolan didn't shoot it very well in Summer League. He was very streaky last season as a shooter, and he's come in and he's really looked like a high-level outside shooter during these last few games. I mean, I said last 8 games shooting 49% from 3, and the volume, it's not crazy high, but it's not low. He's taking around 7 3-pointers per 100 possessions. So that's really nice to see from Nolan, because he has this elite first step, the speed, all of this stuff in that 3-point shot. As for any smaller guard or player like this, it's going to open up a lot. Then you look at also the efficiency from 2. He's shooting around 50% from 2. He's been able to get downhill on a lot of drives. I watched the game this morning. The Nets, the Long Island Nets, lost in overtime to the College Park Skyhawks. And Drake Powell and Ben Sharaf also played in that game, which I'm going to touch on at the end. But Nolan looked really good. He has that speed, and we talked about it going back to the draft, that he's one of the players that has probably the fastest player in the draft in transition and trying to turn the corner. And you see that on so many plays. When he has any straight line open to the basket, he's able to accelerate. Like, he has those, turbo engines. He has that Lamborghini in him when he can hit those jets and get downhill. And he's been able to do that. And for the most part, he's been pretty efficient finishing at the rim. As I said, over 50% from the field, over 50% from 2 over these last 8 games. And last thing, you just look at the playmaking and the efficiency that he's had there. As I said, 7 assists to 3.3 turnovers. He's at a 2.1 assist to turnover ratio over these last 8 games. And he's had a few games, over the 11 total that he's played in the G League where he has, 4, 5, 6 turnovers. So he's going to need to clean that up. But for the most part, the decision-making has looked improved, and the overall confidence has just looked improved, because this has been something that I've heard, from Nets fans and gotten questions from Nets fans who have watched Nolan at Summer League and early this season in the preseason and in the couple of games that he appeared in early in the regular season. Just the confidence not looking great, looking very unsure of himself. And I think you saw that carry over to the first few G League games, but it's been a complete 180. I mean, I was watching the game this morning, and you listen to the announcers talking about it who are covering all of these Long Island Nets games, and they've said the confidence that Nolan's showing in these past few games compared to what they saw early in the G League season, it's just night and day. And it seems like with Nolan, the confidence is growing each game. And with that, it's going to be a conversation about what point does he come up and get some extended NBA reps. I think that'll probably come later, a continued period like later than some of the other guys that we've seen get in as of late, like Ben Saraf. Because Nolan is a little bit smaller, he's a little bit slighter. I think that physically he just has so much longer to go in order to be able to compete with some NBA guys. But I think that this past stretch has been really positive after a shaky start in the preseason and early in the G League season. So that's nice to see. And I think that we are going to see Nolan back up with the NBA Nets at some point this season. But last thing, the Nets did send down Ben Saraf and Drake Powell for this game today. And for this week, the Nets have a 5-day layoff right now, which is extremely unusual, but it's because they didn't qualify for the NBA Cup. So they played on Saturday, and they don't play again until Friday when they travel to face Dallas. So using that time to get these guys some reps, and ultimately I do think that that's a smart move. I mean, you want to get these guys as many minutes as possible. Jordy Fernandez has said it. 60 games between the NBA and the G League. That's the benchmark that the Nets are trying to hit with all these rookies. If they can get a couple more games for guys like Ben Saraf and Drake Powell in this layoff when they're really doing nothing anyway other than practicing, that's a benefit. I do think it's interesting, last thing, that Danny Wolf was not sent down alongside Ben Saraf and Drake Powell. And Danny has obviously been the Nets' most impactful rookie since he came up and cracked the rotation during these last couple of weeks. And the way that he's played, him not being sent down, that could be a sign that he's going to be up with Brooklyn for the remainder of the season. I wouldn't be too surprised if that's the case. I wouldn't be surprised if he did go back down to Long Island at some point, but I think it's more likely that he's up with Brooklyn because he's just looked so good and so impactful. He's really been one of the Nets' 3 or 4 most impactful players over these last 5 or 6 games. And I did a full episode on him yesterday with Lucas Kaplan, so you guys can go check that out. But that's all I got for today's Locked On Nets episode. If you guys do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you have a second and you enjoy the content, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review, anything you could do to engage. Anything you could do to engage is much appreciated. But that's got a couple of more days of practice, and they're going to be back in action in Friday at Dallas. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.